Welcome to Phil Margo, The Lion Roars, brought to you exclusively on MalcolmPresents.com. And of course, I'm not Phil Margo, I'm Malcolm Berman.
I
And
am, and I'm not
my
Malcolm
left is
Berman.
Phil Margo. Hey, Phil.
Yes. Hello.
Hello. The
No.
day after Atlanta wins the World Series.
Yeah, but who cared?
Well, I like it because there's a nice Jewish kid from actually from locally here in California, went to the high school, which is 2 miles away from me, Harvard Westlake, Max Fried, and his boyhood idol, actually it was his father's idol, was Sandy Koufax. And Sandy Koufax was one of probably the Brooklyn Dodger that I loved, even though he went to Los Angeles.
Well, he didn't go to Los Angeles. It's not that he was a traitor.
He didn't have a choice.
That's where the team went.
Yeah, but he was a nice Jewish boy from Brooklyn, went to Lafayette High School.
Yes, I know.
I played basketball for the University of Cincinnati and became one of the all-time great pitchers. Too bad he had arthritis in his shoulder and he had to quit at the age of 30.
Well, I saw him play ball when he was playing in not the middle leagues, you know. When I was in a little league, I think he's a couple of years older than me.
Sandy is, I think it was 82.
Yeah. But when I was in high school, he used to play down at I can't remember the place now.
I think he played Prospect. There was a league in Prospect Park.
No, there was one in Coney Island, near Coney Island.
Was that the one at Kaiser Field where they had those?
Anyway, it's not important. Yeah. So the Atlanta Braves won the World Series. Yippee!
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm glad it wasn't Houston.
The cheater, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, not only that. Anyway, so
the thing that we were going to talk about are your sons.
Yeah,
and their birthdays.
My sons were born on November 3rd, 1968, which is 53 years ago. So they're 53, Noah and Joshua.
Yeah.
They were premature. They weighed 3'6" and 313.
Wow.
And they were in danger for the first 72 hours of not surviving.
They were incubators, right?
Were in isolates, and they were getting oxygen. They didn't have these things back then. They just put the oxygen in the isolate. And the doctor said they had what's called Hyland's membrane, which was a membrane in the passage, the air passage to the lungs, which prevented the baby, as it was developing, from ingesting water and drowning.
Uh-oh.
But it was supposed to dissolve at birth, and it didn't.
Mm.
Well, it didn't dissolve fully. It dissolved partially. And I could see both of them struggling to breathe. You know, they were, I was watching them sitting there, looking at these two newborn children that were my twin sons, which was a surprise. We didn't know they were twins until the Wednesday before they were born, because Abby had a horrible kidney infection from the weight of the children on it. And well, wait, come here, Abby. Abby, come back. Abby.
Yeah, she had a major role in it.
Well, she didn't know that they were in danger. What happened was, I went home. It was probably the worst day of my life.
Well,
went home from the hospital. I went to my mom and dad's house first, and I was miserable. And then I went back to the hospital in the evening. They were born in the morning. And I went to the isolate, and they looked like they were breathing fine. They weren't tugging for breath. They weren't breathing heavy.
By
Because
the way, is the isolate an incubator or the pre-thing for incubators, they were called?
well, I don't know. An incubator was to keep a baby warm,
Hmm.
you know, but I don't know. All I know is it had oxygen and they were under fluorescent lights because they had found a nurse discovered that babies who were premature and were born and had jaundice, which they had, that the fluorescent lights somehow got rid of the jaundice much quicker.
Interesting.
Yeah, and a nurse discovered that. So, because she said one of the parts of the ward that she was in had incandescents and the other one had fluorescence, and she found that the babies who had jaundice under the incandescent lights took longer to get rid of it. You know, and if the jaundice is serious enough, they have to do a blood transfusion.
Mhm.
No, I mean they have to transfer blood. You know, fresh oxygenated blood,
Right.
instead of the blood that's because the reason why it's jaundice is because of the blood. So, but when I went to see them at night, and the doctor said it was a 72-hour critical period, you know, they will see in 72 hours if they're okay or not. And when I saw them in the evening, which was like about 12 hours after they were born, they looked fine. They were getting a little rosier. They were breathing normally, and they were moving their feet, you know, and their hands.
Yeah.
And I called the doctor. We didn't have cell phones then, you know. And I went home and I called the doctor, and he called me back in 2 minutes. He said 2 words to me: "They're fine."
Mazel tov. Yeah.
That's those were the 2 words. They're fine. And when I went to see Abby, who had been, you know, been given all kinds of stuff for the infection of her kidneys, and had slept mostly after the birth, she didn't know it was happening. So I told her, you know, and here we are, 53 years later,
Wow. And what did you name them?
Noah and Joshua.
Noah and
And that
Joshua.
wasn't, and that wasn't hip then. Back then, you didn't have babies named Noah and Joshua. It was rare,
Well,
especially Noah.
actually, my youngest is Joshua.
No, well,
My oldest is Jonathan. I want to give them strong names because when I grew up, Malcolm was not a strong name.
no, that's right, and it is now.
Now I say Malcolm.
Right.
Oh, that's a great
I had
name.
an uncle Malcolm who was only 8 years older than me. So he was like a big brother to me.
Is he,
We were less distance apart in years than I am with my sister.
is he still around, Uncle Malcolm, or he passed?
I mean, my family, I lost my grandfather when he was wonderful, Malcolm's father. It was a routine, I don't know, routine, it was a hernia, I mean, a hemorrhoid operation, and he died.
Yeah, well, those days.
Malcolm died after a hip replacement.
Well, a lot of those people died through infections. They didn't know anything about.
I don't want, the last thing I want anybody to do is to touch my body that way. The doctor said, my eyes, he said I have some cataracts, they're not bad. They don't really affect my vision yet. But he said, if I get the operation, then I'll have like brand new lenses and I'll be able to see. But I said, I don't want anything tearing at my body. I don't want to be a cut. I said, you could do laser, that's fine, but no cutting. So I'm not doing it. I'm going to do it when my eyesight is threatened. That's when I'll do it.
I have what's called umbilical hernia, where like right by my belly button, the a little thing pops up. I think it's like the small intestines. And I said, okay, let's, you know, they put a mesh on top of it, which the operation is really simple, but there's a big incident of infections.
Yeah, of course.
And so I say, forget about it until, it pops up more. I'll have to live with it.
I mean,
As you get older,
that's I have to live with my eyesight the way it is, and it's fine. Today I had my feet done. I go to get like a pedicure, um, wax. They wax it and they cut my nails, and
yeah,
it's really it's
uh,
great.
this is not like well, I'm gonna have to go to a doctor like that because my nails get thick
Yeah,
as you get older. I don't know why.
they get ingrown. You got to be careful. But anyway, so my boys are 53,
53.
and they were a pleasure to raise. I never had to take them out of a restaurant. I never had to tell them to have respect. I never had to do any of that. My daughter too. They were, and when you look at kids today, it's dizzying because they're being enabled to be brats.
Yeah.
And a lot of those enabled brats are now adults running the country, running states, running the government.
Yeah.
They're the police officers, the firemen. And some of those people are brats.
What do they do now, the kids?
What do they do?
Yeah, professionally.
Well, Noah, as you know, is on the board of education in Beverly Hills. He was elected 3 times to it.
Is that a full-time job or?
First time as a writer. No, it's not a job at all. But he has property, and he manages his property. He's a contractor, and he of course has a degree in writing, master's in writing.
Mm-hmm.
And we did get a play published. And Joshua works for SAP. It's a huge company worldwide out of Germany that does programs for big corporations, And he's a rabbi.
Computer programs or?
No, just overall. I mean, if you look it up, it's in Germany. It's one they do ads, and he's been working at home for the last, I don't know, 20 years. Before this all started, they worked remote, and he gradually went up the rung, and
And how did he become a rabbi?
well, online and in school here downtown.
Oh.
He moved to LA. He was here for about 6 or 7 years, and he did it online, and he went to school downtown, and he finished up, and then they went back to Colorado.
Yeah. He doesn't have a congregation or anything, right?
Well, he doesn't really. He does bat mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs, and he does conversions and things like that. But he's not. He wants to be more of a teaching rabbi than a congregation rabbi. But right now he still has his job.
That sounds nice.
But he does it occasionally. He was just in July. He came into LA. We saw him because he had a bar mitzvah out in Temecula.
So what is it? Have Tallis will travel?
Yeah, well, have Star will travel. But he does, and he teaches also by Zoom and he does services also by Zoom.
Interesting.
And Neely, of course, is a teacher in middle school.
That's your daughter, right?
Yes, my daughter, and her husband, and Noah's wife is a psychologist, a licensed doctor psychologist. Joshua's wife is an administrative law judge, a lawyer for Social Security. She works for Social Security. And Neely's husband is he was just almost on strike at IATSE. He's a dialogue editor.
Oh, a dialogue editor?
Emmy-winning dialogue editor.
What is a dialogue editor?
Dialogue editor not only adds the dialogue that needs to be fixed and stuff and moves, you know what I mean? When they have to add dialogue or fix
I
dialogue.
thought that would be under rewrite.
No, no, no. He doesn't write the dialogue. He engineers it.
No, I mean, rewrite it, edit it. But that's, I guess it's similar.
No, I don't know. I mean, he won an Emmy for Pacific, the miniseries.
Ah,
See, his and not to talk out of school, but his movies have the best dialogue to rest of the soundtrack relationship of most movies I see. He knows how to do that. He knows the difference between volume and apparent level.
mhm.
Volume is how loud it is. Level can be done with frequency. If you add a high end to a voice, it'll come out more, right?
Yeah,
It'll right on top. Adding the amount of high end pulls the voice out above the rest of the track, but doesn't make it sound tinny.
well, isn't that sound editing?
Hmm?
Wouldn't that be sound editing?
No, well, you have to start with the dialogue.
Yeah,
He gives his edited dialogue to the sound editor who puts it in the film.
yeah.
But if you hand them something that already works, they just use it as it is
Mhm.
because it's right.
Interesting.
Yeah, and every one of his movies that he does, all of them, they all have that. You don't have to strain. You know how sometimes you listen to a movie and you can't quite hear the dialogue, not because your hearing is bad, because it gets buried.
Yeah.
His movies don't happen. It doesn't happen with his movies. The dialogue rides above all the way through.
Well, that's interesting because in a way, I mean, he's only your son-in-law, but that you have that ability also as a producer, as a record
Well,
producer.
that's we made records. Apparent level, which is a phony word, but it's because it's not raising volume, it's raising frequency.
Mhm.
So, and we had a record that we had finished, was Portrait of My Love, and it was really good, except it just wasn't quite right. And we couldn't, and we even recorded it a second time to try to get it right, and we still didn't. We finally fixed it when we mastered it, and we added a little more mid-range and a little top end to the vocals. And it put the vocals right on the top where it belonged and made the difference. And it wasn't a smash, but it was it was in the 20s chart record.
Was that There Could Never Be a Portrait of My Love? There could never,
Yes.
whatever. No, that was the
Yes.
song. Who sang that?
Who sang it originally?
Yeah.
I think it was Matt Monroe or one of them guys, or Steve Lawrence originally. I don't remember, but we covered it. We did it with fours. There could never be one
Portrait.
of my love. We did it in up tempo instead of there could never be.
Yeah.
And it was on the charts and it did well. And we performed it. We used to perform it when we did our performances. We used to sing it, and people enjoy it because it had a life before we touched it.
Right. It was a familiar tune.
And that record was literally saved by EQ when we did the master. When you take the finished record and you put the final stuff on it, and then you make the acetate, which becomes the pressing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. When you did records, you did it. All the musicians were in the studio at the same time.
Yes.
Versus doing now, I think everything is on a separate
Well,
track.
we see this will never be part of history, but we were the ones who made that happen with the union. The musicians union did not allow overdubbing, or they called it sweetening of a track. Once you made the track, that was it. So we were in one day recording He's So Fine, the Chiffons,
Mm.
and a couple of other songs. And 802 came in, the union, and said, you can't do this because we were playing outside and we were putting the girls on and then overdubbing them. And you're not allowed to do that. And we said, how could we not do that? We had to be in the studio playing the music, the instruments. We couldn't be in the booth and in the studio at the same time. So they changed the rule, and they allowed they allowed sweetening of instruments. You could add violins to a track. Was by the time we were through, which like we would do the track, put a rough lead on it just so that we know where we're going. And then we'd come in the studio later, put the group on, put the lead on, and add violins or whatever we wanted to add to it. And it was totally legal.
Mhm.
You just paid the musicians for their time like you would
Right.
ordinarily. And that changed the rule. And they called us, the guys in the musicians union called us the puppies because we had BT Puppy Records. And they called us the
The
puppies.
puppies.
Yeah. They
You
knew
did.
when they came in and saw us on a date, they said, oh, okay, fine. They would leave.
Did you ever miss the days when you're creating music again?
What?
When you're creating music,
Yeah,
creating new, did you miss those days? Being in the studio and working with the musicians?
I am a flawed character, okay? I did everything that was in front of me, and I did it well. I mean, we made He's So Fine. We made One Fine Day. We made Denise. We made Knock Three Times, and we made Candida. I was playing drums on those. I was the producer. Uh, um, and when I did something and it was over, it was fine. Well, next, I don't miss I don't miss being in a recording studio recording an artist. I don't miss that. The only thing I do miss right now is doing the shows we did when we were performing live.
A live
Because
audience.
there was a certain kick about that. And because of the pandemic and the fact that Mitch passed away, kind of really put a dent in that. So I don't know if that'll ever happen again. But I miss that. I don't miss the recording. I miss being hired to write something. As I say, I'm working on this project that has some interest, but still it's hard. But I like creating and writing, and I can do that no matter what.
Right.
And whatever happens, happens. But but you keep trying. But I don't miss the record business as such. I don't miss that. I don't miss working with a group and getting them into shape to perform and all that. I don't miss that.
Well,
I really don't.
it seems like you're happy with your life.
Well, yes, I am. There are times when I believe I'm a fraud, that all these things I did were off the cuff. You know what I mean? They really were. I mean, think about it. I was in high school. I was a very below average student. The music teacher made us audition for this voice chorus she's starting, right? So I had to go up and sing, which I didn't want to do, but you had to, or you would fail for the term.
Yeah.
And if you failed, you didn't graduate because that was a required course, music. It's not now, it isn't, but then it was.
Yeah.
So I auditioned and I got, and she recognized that I had really good ability and good pitch. And so I went into the chorus and we did the concert and she asked the volunteers to sing at the sock hop. And I sang with my brother and people came over to us and shook our hands. Girls introduced themselves to me. And I was already a junior in high school, So I had this thing, it would be great if I could work in the Catskills for the summer of my graduate year in '59. And I tried, okay, I'm going to learn how to play an instrument. Because my brother pointed out that I couldn't be a musician if I didn't play anything, you know. And I said, well, what about piano? And my father said, no, it costs $600. And my mother said, no, Philip gets a piano, Leo. And he got me a piano, and I started tinkering with it. And he got me a teacher, and I couldn't learn. I wasn't learning fizz. He wants me to play scale. I don't care about scale. I need to play songs. So I taught myself a method which is they use now all the time. And this is back in the 1950s. I taught myself chords in the left hand and the melody in the right hand. And the chord symbols were written on the music. I didn't have to read the notes. It said F, F minor, B flat, and that was easy. It was easy.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Play-
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I could play. Well, you know, the piano has a left hand and a right hand,
Right.
right? The right hand is a treble clef up here, and the left hand is the bass clef down there. So so if you think about pa, 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 that's the bass, right?
Yeah.
And the treble clef is la 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 la, right? So the music on music sheets, they're written both clefs together. So you see all the music for the bass clef, all the notes, which include chords. So it could have 5 or 10 notes in one staff, you know. But the melody note was one note usually up on the top. And the chord said F. So I learned how to play all the chords. I just learned them just to come to them. And I learned how to play the melodies by reading it. You know, I could read those because it was much easier to read one note than 12.
Yeah.
And I started a band. And there I was in the Catskills playing in the band. And that's what led to the tokens and all the other stuff. So it was really, and then when I became a writer, I was sitting in a room. I was representing Robert Guillaume. I was sitting in a green room with the network executives. One of them was a vice president. And I said, I have this idea for a movie. He says, what is it? And I told him. And he said, call this guy to Monday morning, right? We taped on Fridays. So I called this guy who had already been told by this vice president that I was going to call. So he said, yes, okay, we'll do it. Because he had the phone call from the top. You know, development guys don't do anything unless the top says it's okay.
Yeah.
This way, he didn't have to go to the top because the top already liked the idea, right? And so we made a deal.
Well, that's not a fraud. What you basically did is you hopped on the opportunities, the openings. You took advantage of what was there.
Well, yes, but yes, I took advantage of it, not knowing what I was doing.
Right, but it sounds like you regret not being the starving artist in a garret with
No,
only drinking water, and you couldn't
no,
you had to believe in yourself. And
well, you know, before I started in the business, I worked on Wall Street. My uncle Malcolm got me a job with a Steiner Rouse. It was a a bond house.
yeah, we covered that before, right? I remember.
Yeah, and I did that well. I was good at it. They wanted to, even after I called the partner's son an idiot, they wanted to send me to New York Institute of Finance to be a registered rep, to be a customer's man, as they said.
See, maybe you missed your opportunity. You could have been a multi-billionaire right now.
Probably.
But you might have hated every minute of it.
Well, I'm an artist, that I know.
But have you had fun? Would you say that your life was fun?
Yes. People, it was filled with some amazing memories, standing with Robert Guillaume when he got his Emmy, things like that. Having a #1 record more than once, having these gold records on the wall, which says something. Yeah, and I'm married for 55 years. How many people can say that?
Well,
the
but
same
they,
woman.
right, they could say that, but it might be 3 or 4 separate women.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. So,
5 years this woman, 10 years with the other woman.
right, but I'm married 55 years to Abby Sue, the former Abby Sue Diamond.
Yeah, I think Abby Sue Diamond should get the award also. We got to have her on the show.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, she's more. I wanted to do a cooking show with her years back. She would have been great, but she just was too. She wasn't. She wasn't confident. She's a great cook, and she always was. And she could have. She could have had a cooking show, and she had a cooking show that she would say, "No, this is crap. Don't do that." I mean, she would do it straight.
Well, Phil, I hate to tell you, we still could do it on Zoom.
Yeah, we probably she still don't want to do it.
Yeah, anyway, talk her into doing it. We've just run out of time,
Well,
believe it or not.
thank you. Thank you for moving it. And and I got to go celebrate my son's birthday now.
Okay, celebrate the birthday. Wish them happy birthdays for me.
Thank you all.
And
Peace.
we'll see you next week.
Bye, cutie.
Okay, bye.